guys? Welcome to Everything and More, the podcast which we talk about everything and more. So today I'm here with Omid. Omid, what's your last name?
Elie. Ellie.
Omid Ellie. One of a twin. Who's older, you or your brother?
Me.
By?
A whole minute.
Oh my god, a whole minute. So you guys are like, what do you think about your brother? You guys have a good relationship? What do you think about the whole twin experience? Because when I look at twins, I'm like, okay, twins, they're like BFFs. They wipe each other's butt after going to the bathroom. They kiss each other, good night sleep, you know?
That makes sense. But for the most part, it's usually hit or miss. You can have twins that are best friends. Like I've met two girls that even said that they want to have their weddings on the same day with twin boys. And then you find other twins that'll do anything to separate from each other. And I think that just comes from whether or not the twins are given their own identities or if they're forced to be paired together. So I've noticed that the twins that are normally always forced to wear the same clothes, be taken everywhere together, not really have a separate identity, they're the ones that push harder to be separated because they need to find their own identity, figure out who they are as individuals. And then there are other twins that, they just enjoy the attention, they enjoy being together all the time, and they thrive in it, a lifelong best friend kind of deal. So I think it just depends. Mm-hmm. But it's largely on how you're raised together and whether or not it's productive for those individuals.
So how do you think you and your brother, were you guys ever forced to like wear the same shirts, same pants, same shoes?
All the damn time.
All the damn time.
I think it came to a point where I told my parents, I don't want to wear this, I want to wear that, and I don't want to wear it because he's wearing it. And my dad was the one that was trying to enforce us to be the same, while my mom was trying to push for, no, if he wants to wear something different, just let him wear something different. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the first breaking point. And then from then on, it was always a competition between the two of us. So either you can grow up and say, oh, this is the nice one, this is the mean one, this is the funny one, this is the serious one. You also get a lot of ones that kind of rank you. So I think me and my brother will always hit with which one's the stupid one, which one's the dumb one, which one's the strong one, which one's the weak one. We always get asked questions, which one of you would win in a fight, this one or this one. So for the most part, me and my brother had those answers ready, but they're also incredibly polarizing.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because we knew factually which one of us was which, and people would be like, oh, you're just going to say it like that? Yeah, we know the answers to your questions. What's any other dumb questions you have for us? Because there's people always think they're original with their jokes, but they're not. So it's, for the most part, we're the type of twins that needed to separate by a good 400 miles to discover our own identities and become individual people.
Where's your brother right now?
Well, my brother went to Davis while I stayed at home, and then I went to UCLA.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like he was in a different state right now.
No.
Okay.
I think that's what salvaged our relationship. And then when we came back home, we did a little bit more fighting, and then I went to UCSF for a program, and he was still at home. So that kind of once again fixed our relationship because we weren't stuck in the same room together and fighting. And then when I came back home, I was like, I can't share a room with this guy anymore. So I kind of took over my sister's bedroom, and from that point we were kind of able to maintain a relationship with each other where we both have our own separate friend groups. We have some mutual friends so we can do some things together, but for the most part we're not lumped in together. We're not stuck with each other at all times.
That's cool. I think and it's really easy to tell you guys apart because you guys have different muscle mass.
Yeah.
What's the joke you said about the before and after?
Oh yeah, we just have a group of friends who made the joke that my brother is the before and I'd be the after going to the gym.
Well, why doesn't Navid go to the gym? Your twin.
He does go to the gym. He just focuses on something else. I've spent a good 5 years now working on building muscle, strength, mass, while my brother, whether he's biking, whether he's running, he still plays a lot of basketball, so he's working on a lot more cardio.
Yeah.
And as far as his muscle mass, if he's at the gym, he's doing stuff that's more for maintenance and not as much as building mass.
I see. What made you want to start going to the gym?
I think while I was at UCLA, I met this guy who played football, and he just said, "Hey, you want to come work out with me at the gym?" And I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to go. I'm paying for this membership. Let's go. So I started working out with this guy, and his workouts were pretty intense, but I felt like I learned a lot, and I knew at that point that I should keep on going, or else I'm probably not going to make much of a habit out of it.
Yeah.
And also, it was at the same time when I was also getting into my Judaism and discovering it. But the problem with that is that I was learning a lot, but I didn't feel any growth spiritually. So for me, I figured I needed to go to the gym, and if I can see physical evidence of growth and improvement, it was like a physical proof that I'm actually being productive with my life and improving myself in some way or manner. Because with spirituality, it's never certain, but at least through my physicality, I knew I was improving.
So you said you were studying Judaism, but you weren't seeing any proof of growth. So you decided to go to the gym and get growth there. Is that, and see maybe your physicality could help your spirituality?
Right. Well, all in all, I think it's about, trying to become a better person and grow as a person and be a better person. And not only does that come through a sense of morality, a sense of responsibility, a sense of just working hard to accomplish certain goals, but I also think physically, whether it be your physical health, whether it just be your utility in being able to lift heavy things and put them back down, whether it be it can even be physical attractiveness, because no one's going to deny that the stronger you are, the more attractive you can look to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And I figured these are all areas that I needed to improve, and I worked my ass off to make sure that every day I was at least somehow improving myself in some way, shape, or form. I always lived with, and this is before Judaism, but I always lived with the philosophy that if I go through a day without having a story or somehow learning something, or now I changed to improving myself, then, I pretty much wasted that day.
That day was a waste.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you were born Jewish, right? Your mom's Jewish. That's the whole thing with Judaism. If your mom's not Jewish, then you're technically not a Jew, and then you got to convert, right? That's how it works.
Yes. So your mom has to be Jewish for you to be Jewish spiritually, because as far as the most orthodox tradition goes, the Judaism is passed through the mom, but the customs and traditions are passed through the father.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
So if your mom's not Jewish, then your mom, then you're not Jewish.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, man. So you got to go through lines and lines and generations of moms being Jewish for you to be Jewish.
Yeah.
Oh, you lucky son of a gun. I wish I was Jewish.
Right. The odds are not that high.
The odds are not that high. You got to look into it. No, but speaking of that, you said you were never really that much into Judaism until you got to UCLA and you started talking to some of the rabbis, and they started changing your mind. Or can you explain some of that?
Well, UCLA is known for having a Jewish population, and for the most part, I think a rabbi reached out to me, mainly asked if I was Jewish, and I said, "Why, yes I am. How'd you know?"
Why did you ask? Because you look Jewish?
Yeah, I don't know why he asked, but then we started talking. Invited me to Shabbat dinner, invited me to come learn with him. And for the most part, I always identified as being more religious than my Reform counterparts in this area. Like, my parents were members of a Reform temple, but I never identified with them. Instead, every Saturday morning, we went to a prayer service that was in the morning for Shabbat, and it felt a lot more authentic, because instead of having, singing, instead of having English, instead of, weird pauses where they'd advertise what the temple is going to be doing for the rest of the week, it was just straight through. We need 10 men. We're going to start prayer. We're going to bring out the Torah. Everything is in Hebrew. The singing is fun. And I also had this mentor by the name of Effie who used to come take me and my brother out and teach us how to read and write in Hebrew. And I think that was really important for us, because it kind of got us started on the whole train of, there was something more to this, because he was a very spiritual man and he made you feel the spirituality. But I never learned about my religion. Everything I learned was through the Reform people, and it just didn't, it felt like Christianity to me. So and then when I was approached by these Orthodox men, I was, intimidated. I was like, oh, Orthodox, like I don't want to be crazy. I don't want to be.
Yeah. Like, explain what Orthodox means. I have does that mean like super Jew pretty much?
Basically means I guess the level of Judaism is how strict you follow the law of the Torah.
Okay.
And the Orthodox Jews are the ones that follow it to the strictest manner possible. Now, there's even different sects in the Orthodox as far as which commentators of the Talmud or the oral law that they believe they follow, because there's a bunch of different rabbis with a bunch of different opinions, and that's just a cliche of Judaism where if you have 3 Jews in one room, they have like 5 opinions or something like that. But that's just how it is, because it's the entire Tanakh is essentially an argument between all these rabbis of how to interpret certain lines in the Torah, and depending on which sect of Orthodoxy you believe in, that's kind of the law you try to follow and you try to teach and you try to say is the most accurate as to what God expects of us when he says those words in the Torah. So, I just explored it because these seem to be the people that not only believed in the religion but also put their money where their mouth is, because they're the ones who are willing to never eat a double from In-N-Out. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who, the moment it strikes 6 p.m. on a Friday night, their phones are already away, the food's in the oven, and it's getting ready for Shabbat.
Can you explain that? Because we talked about it at length, but I highly doubt the listeners know why Jewish people stop doing that at 6 p.m.
Well, it's not just 6 p.m. It's essentially sundown. But 6 p.m. is pretty damn early to stop your life for the day, because you still have like another, look close to half the day left. But essentially, for Shabbat, it says that you're not allowed to do work because God created the world in 6 days. On the 7th day, he rested. And the idea is if God rested on the 7th day, then maybe we should too. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, they tried to determine how do you define work. And they defined work by essentially what was done to build the tabernacle, with some rules that were also created. But the essential idea is don't create. And so you'll see that a lot of people won't drive, they won't use their phones, they won't light candles on the day of, because essentially it's the act of creating a fire. Or, you even seen some houses where instead of having a roll of toilet paper that you rip, they have either tissue boxes or tissue-like toilet paper that you pull because you're not allowed to tear from perforations. Like, I'm telling you, these guys are strict, and it's almost intimidating but also admirable how strict they keep these rules, because they want to put their money where their mouth is, and for them, it's like the ultimate good to be doing these things. So for some people, it might seem crazy and strict and inconvenient, but for them, it's kind of a lifestyle that they've just grown accustomed to. And
I'm sure you get accustomed to it.
Yeah, and it was just really interesting. Yeah. So, I go to their houses for Shabbat dinners, and I start talking to them about what they learn and what they're teaching. And for them, it was almost common sense, everything that came out of their mouth, because it just made sense, and it resonated with me. Because there's a lot of values that were in Judaism that I think my grandparents taught my parents, but my parents never translated them to me as Judaism. It was just like, this is just the way life is, and this is the best way to live your life.
I see.
So I feel like I've had a lot of values growing up that were Jewish, and it just so happened that they were Jewish though. And with that, I was like, well, if I already resonate with this faith so much, let me explore this more. Let me see what else I can learn from this, because I can probably learn at the very least how to be a better person.
Yeah, that's one thing I really like about religion, right? It does, I think on average, it does tend to make people better, or at least moral, but not in every aspect, right? You do tend to see a lot of bigotry in religion, whether it's Christianity. I haven't seen much in Judaism, or at least I'm not aware of much in Judaism or Islam or whatever it may be.
I guess it depends on how you define bigotry, though, because definitely as somebody that's been within the Jewish communities, even I've seen my fair share of what you can call bigotry.
Amongst Judaism?
Yeah, amongst Judaism, whether it between different Jews or between other people. But you also see a lot of bigotry, or what I like to call elitism, in a lot of these cultures. Because I think every culture, the best way to really, make your culture flourish and become stronger is if you develop a sense of pride. a defense of, I don't want to call it nationalism, but essentially what it is, because if you're not proud of your traditions and your culture, what makes you think you're going to keep it up for so long? The problem is that people that take it too far and they think, oh, we're better than everybody.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. Instead of saying, oh, we're proud of who we are and we are aware that our customs are best for us, but for other people, they might have their own ideas. And that's another thing I really appreciate about Judaism, and I think a lot of other people do, is that as a monotheistic religion, what separates it from other religions is that it doesn't have missionaries. It doesn't go out to try to convert people. If anything, it tries to keep the numbers within itself, but let other people live their lives the way they do. And I think as somebody that considers himself a liberal, I strongly believe in the idea of, I do me, you do you, just don't get in the way of me doing me and I won't get in the way of you doing you, and we won't have any problems. And I think that's I really respect that about Judaism because it at least respects other people's cultures. But I will also criticize that even though they don't try to convert people outside of the religion, within the religion, you'll see that there's also still a lot of really orthodox people that, first of all, they look down on people that are secular or don't believe as strongly as they do. And then there are the others that, for the most part, their life goal is to convert you to become more orthodox or to bring you into the more orthodoxy. And for a lot of people, that feels like they're ripping you out of your own life because, if you've grown accustomed to going out every Friday night, seeing your friends, driving over there, and then you're telling them, well, now you're going to, if you want to become Orthodox, you can't do that anymore. You have to stay inside. You have to, only hang out with Jewish people or whatever. Like, you have to change your life completely, and it's really hard for some people to accept. But, there's bigotry everywhere, but I also see that it's for them at least, you can at least appreciate that's for a greater good. Just like with missionaries and other people trying to convert people to your religion. I think if in any culture, custom, idea, if you think that your idea is for the greater good and the betterment of a society, it almost makes sense that you don't want to spread it to other people so they can share with you this greater good that's good for everybody. So I can kind of understand it. I feel like there's also, to a certain degree, if someone says, no, I don't need it in my life, you got to back off. And for a lot of these people that want to convert, they can have more aggressive methods, or they can just be a little too persistent, and that also can be a turnoff for a lot of people.
So we went to eat the other week, right? And what did you order? You ordered something with chicken, right?
The Panang curry.
Yeah, and it had chicken in it, right?
Yeah.
But then as a Jew, you're not supposed to eat chicken, right?
Well, I mean, as a Jew, I can eat chicken. It just needs to be kosher.
Yeah, exactly. It needs
I can
to be
confirm
kosher.
that chicken was not kosher.
Yeah, exactly. That chicken was not kosher. And you said, and then I asked, oh, Omid, aren't you like Orthodox? Aren't you like trying to do all this? And you're like, I should, and it's inconvenient for me right now, but I know I'm going to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So that's basically me being a huge hypocrite, because I think one of the worst things you can do in Judaism is when you know the rules and you blatantly disregard them. And that's essentially what I started doing, mostly because, it's been an inconvenience for me. I think I've lived my life indulging in a lot of these benefits of diversity of foods, diversity of tastes, and also just not limiting myself to what I can and cannot eat. I've kept kosher for a large period of time, and that in itself, even in Los Angeles, was inconvenient and hard. I did it, and when I moved back home, when there's less support and a lot less resources, it just became too challenging, and I decided that I'm still conscious of all these rules that I'm breaking at every moment. Like, anytime I have some dessert after I had dinner, knowing it has dairy in it, I do feel a huge sense of shame in myself still.
You're not supposed to have dairy?
Yeah, you can't have dairy after meat. Like,
okay.
It's one of those very basic rules. I still don't eat pork. That's the one rule I still keep, and I avoid shellfish as much as I can, mostly because I don't like it that much anyway, so I can easily just be like, I don't need this. But it's still really inconvenient when people are trying to go out, and, I think one story that I've seen bigotry been thrown in my face was, I've been keeping no pork all my life, and one of my friends said, hey, we're going to go get ramen, and I kind of invited myself to the dinner because I had nothing to do. And they're like, yeah, sure, come. So I come with them and I ask them, oh, by the way, what's ramen? And they said, oh, well, this place serves ramen, but we're just going to let you know that this place happens to, like, everything is pork. And I said, oh, okay.
Really interesting. No beef? Or...
Yeah, so I walked to the front and I'm like, do you guys have any dishes that don't have pork or at least vegetarian? And they said, no, we bathe all of our noodles and food in pork fat. And according to kosher law, that's already, I can't have that. Mm-hmm. So it kind of created a little problem because I'm like, well, shit, I can't have this food. What am I going to do? And the lady at the front desk said, well, you can't just come and sit down. We have an $8 minimum for you to sit down. And I said, okay, fine. I looked at the menu and I saw each can of soda was $2 and there was 4 of us. So I'm like, how about I just buy everybody drinks and we can resolve this right now and I'll just sit down with you guys. So I buy the drinks, we sit down, and then one of my friends looks at me and he says, Omid, why do you have to be such a Jew? And he stands up and goes to the bathroom. And my buddy looks at me and he's like, yo, man, I'm so sorry he just said that to you. Like, and I'm like, you know what? I'm used to it because it's not the first time someone's been a dick to me. And I'm like, how can I be Jewish when I paid $2 for a can of soda worth like less than $1? Yeah. And I paid for everyone. He should have at least said thank you that I bought him his drink. Yeah. But instead, he threw a slur in my face. He came, sat down. Never heard of that incident again. I don't know if he was ashamed, but he never apologized for it. And I mean, to this day, I'm still kind of bitter about it, but I don't hold it against him because he's different. That person's a different person now.
Oh, that's cool that you think that way.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, words don't affect me. It's intentions. And I think that person had the shittiest intentions, and he was probably hungry. But at the end of the day, that's just how some people think, and there's nothing I can do about it. But, you know, that's an example of how someone keeping kosher can slightly inconvenience others because they're trying to enjoy themselves. And I realized I invited myself, so I wasn't going to be like, hey, let's go to the place across the street. I instead said, you know, I want to hang out with you people. Let me just buy your drinks and let's sit down and enjoy our time.
And you were just there sitting down while they were eating?
Yeah.
Cool. There was like absolutely nothing. There wasn't even like, well, maybe not fries, but there wasn't
nothing.
Like a spring roll or anything?
Nothing.
Jesus, everything in pork?
Everything was in pork.
That's insane.
I mean, what can you do though? So I mean, you know, but I still enjoyed the time after that, after getting over the slur.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
And like I said, we're all still friends after that. I just, for the most part, now I know or knew from then on, don't go get ramen. If someone says let's get ramen, I'll say, how about not?
Or we'll get something else, or you guys enjoy it without me.
Yeah. But for the most part, I mean, even as a Jewish person, I'm used to people eating around me because for Yom Kippur, when most Jews would be at temple, I still went to school.
Hold up. What's Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur is when we fast for like 24 plus hours.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So, I mean, most Jews would go to temple.
No water,
no nothing.
Okay.
But they'd go to temple and I would be at school and all my friends would be eating their lunches in front of me. So I'm very used to having people eat in front of me. Even the holiday where we can't have bread, Passover, you know, people would taunt me and eat bread in front of my face. It never bothered me. It was fun, if anything. But I'm just used to being around people eating while I'm not eating. So it wasn't rude. I was okay with it.
Mm-hmm. So you see yourself in your family, you're definitely the most Jewish person in your family. Like your mom's not that Jewish, your dad's not that Jewish, and your brother's not that Jewish, right?
No. Well, they're not as religious, I would say.
Yeah, because it's weird because Judaism's that one thing where you can be religiously Jewish, or you can be like nationally Jewish but not religiously Jewish.
I feel like for a lot of people, if they're Jewish and they know it, their parents would be like, they'd tell them they're Jewish and they can identify as being within the Jewish people. But when they say spiritually or religiously, like they might be atheist or Buddhist, they just only identify as a Jew because they have it in their bloodline or whatever. And they also would usually know which side of their family it comes from because most Jews know that that's an important detail to point out to your kids. And then there's other people that not only identify as Jewish, but they would practice Jewish, or they at least know the laws and they study them or practice them. And as far as everybody in my family, I would be the one that's probably the most studied and practices the most, and also probably intends on practicing the most.
Do you speak any Hebrew?
I used to take classes, but I'm pretty sure I forgot most of it to a point where it's insulting if I say I even have a beginner's knowledge of it.
Can you say like anything right now? Just
The basics that you wouldn't normally say in Israel, which are Toda Rabbah and Slicha, which are sorry and thank you. The moment you say those words in Israel, they know you're a tourist and they'll take advantage of you. Never say thank you. Never say sorry. I also know the one of the bigger basic ones that everybody should know is Lo midaber ivrit. I don't speak Hebrew. Right? That comes in handy because almost everybody in that country can speak English. I think it's the third most spoken language in that country behind Russian and Hebrew. And Arabic too. Huh?
In Israel?
Yeah. It's top 5.
Man, they speak a lot of languages in there, huh?
Oh yeah. It's a country full of refugees. So there's definitely a lot of Russians. And I'm sure from the Bay Area we know there is a lot of Russian Jews. We've met through Russian Jews.
Shout out to Boston.
Yeah. What is it? There's definitely a lot of Arabs from the Palestinians. There's a lot of Iraqi Jews, Egyptian Jews, Lebanese Jews, Yemenite Jews. There's just a bunch of refugees from a bunch of different countries. And now, as of most recently, they're taking in a lot of Ethiopian refugees. And that's creating a lot of conflict there too. But now that's another language that it can be spoken in that region. There's just a lot of languages there.
So now since we're in the topic of Israel.
So you baited me.
Yeah, no, you baited yourself. You want to at least talk about what's going on in Israel with Palestine and everything, or at least give right now just a basic rundown what the hell is going on? Because I feel like most people, including myself, don't even know like the basics. You just watch the news and you see these horrible things happening. You're like, whoa, this is BS. Why are they doing this? Blah blah blah. So you want to give like a basic rundown of what's happening over there?
I guess without going into the history of it, the land is for the most part controlled by the Israelis, or the Jewish Israelis if you want to call them that. And there's land that has been allocated to the Palestinians, or at least that they have settlements in, and they're referring to the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But the Gaza Strip...
That's Palestine territory, right?
See, it's hard to... it's Palestinian territory, but technically there is no Palestine. And that's a very controversial thing to bring up. But for the most part, as a nation, Palestine has never been established. So the West Bank technically used to belong to Jordan, and the Gaza Strip used to be part of the Sinai Peninsula, and they used to belong to Egypt. But for the most part, the West Bank is now part of Israel still. And the Gaza Strip has been stripped of all Israeli occupation. So, as far as that goes, that has become completely Palestinian territory, and I think is a great microcosm of what would happen if there were such a two-state solution, in which a lot of people are pushing for.
Yeah, so speaking of that two-state solution, it seems like right now, like the Israeli people and the Palestine people aren't really getting along with each other. So what's, in my opinion, like what's the big deal of just being like, you have your own thing, we have our own thing? Like what's the big deal with the two-state solution? Why don't they do something like that?
Well, and now if you want to get into the history...
And then just what is the two-state solution?
So the two-state solution is basically separating the lands between Israel and what would be then considered Palestine, so that the Arabs in the area and the Israelis or Jewish people of the area would have their own land. I don't want to misrepresent that, but essentially it's the Palestinians and the Jewish people. So we'd have land that's considered Israel and land considered Palestine. So the Israelis would have to relinquish land to Palestinians so that they can rule it on their own and run their own country without any Israeli influence or settlement or whatever conflict that you want to call it. But they would just have their own lands, and theoretically we'd have peace.
Theoretically. So why? So I was like, it seems like from what I've seen, obviously, we live in the Bay Area. We have a lot of liberal folks living here, and liberal folks tend to, support the Palestine. And, just what pops up in my feed is a lot of stuff. I see like a lot of messed up shit that the Jewish people are doing to the Palestine people, like bombing them or acting like dicks. Like how?
Really? Is that? I mean, what example do you have of that? Because as far as the news that I've seen, a lot of it is rockets being indiscriminately fired from the Gaza Strip into Israeli territory, and Israel responding with their missile defense system, which can impressively pinpoint the direction or where the rocket's going to be at a certain point in time, and it shoots it down. And that's all in a sense of defense. And when it comes to firebombing the Palestinian people, that is absolutely not the case. Even when they do carry out attacks in the Palestinian territory, if you want to call it that, they drop down leaflets, they warn the people, they say, hey, we are going to bomb this exact area. Because for some, I believe it's either a weapons base or they know there's a known high-ranking terrorist there. But for the most part, every single attack from the Israeli people is calculated, aimed at weakening the Hamas or whatever occupying terrorist organization that's in the area at the moment, while Hamas is firing rockets indiscriminately into Israel regardless of civilian casualties. And the only differences you see are that the casualties of Palestinians are much higher than the Israelis, because the Israeli government happens to have the sense that their job is to protect their people. And to do that, they have alarm systems that go throughout the entire country. So whenever a rocket or a threat is fired from a nearby country, because they're surrounded by enemies, these alarms will go off, and every single house is required to have bomb shelters. So these people know they have...
Every single house in Israel?
Every single house in Israel has a bomb shelter, because they're fully aware of the dangers that surround them. So when these alarms go off, they know they have maybe 13 seconds to get their entire family and rush them into the bomb shelter to protect them. So you see that Israel goes out of its way to protect its citizens, while on the flip side, Palestinian leaders, or I like to call them Hamas because that's who they democratically elected to lead their people, a known terrorist organization who in their charter says they want to see the destruction of the Jewish people, spread their blood from the river to the sea. And it's also in the Palestinian charter. That's one of their mottos. They say that, we enjoy death like the Jews enjoy life, or something like that. Like they have some really messed up ideologies, but they were democratically elected by these people who not only try to kill civilians on the Israeli side, so it's not political. They also tend to tell their people, no, you can't go into hiding. You need to stand outside, and you need to make sure that you're here, because if they bomb this area, they'll kill civilians. Like, best case scenario, they kill you. Worst case scenario, they don't fire the rockets, but we get to keep our weapons now that you guys were standing above, that we buried under schools, mosques, civilian homes. Like,
So you think this terrorist organization that was democratically elected, they want the people who voted them to die?
Yes, they want those numbers because it's great publicity for them.
Oh, interesting.
I don't fault the Palestinian people for anything that's going on, except for those that elected this terrorist organization to take over them.
When they elected them, did they know that this terrorist organization was going to be like this?
I would say that when they elected Hamas, it was in a time of desperation, because I think those are people that do feel like they're being disenfranchised, and you'll see that when people are disenfranchised or they're back against the wall, they'll go to any extreme to regain the control over their lives. But I will never accept violence. I'll never accept civilian casualties or attempted civilian casualties as an excuse for just any. It's not an excuse for anything. Like, it's the ultimate evil to take an innocent life. What do the Israeli people have to do that the government? How are they involved with the government? Mm-hmm. So I don't fault the Palestinian people. I see them more as victims. But at the same time, when you're in Israel's position, you have to consider what's more important, protecting the lives of your own civilians or protecting the lives of another country's civilians. And Israel does their best to do both, but if they had to prioritize, I think any rational human being would say you got to protect your own family above somebody else's.
Yeah, I can see that.
And on top of that, like, what what measures, what degree, what lengths are you willing to go to protect your own family while trying not to harm the other side as much as you can? And it's really hard to play those. Like, look at the recent protests that happened. You had
Israel?
Yeah, when it was, I think it was after Trump decided to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is the proper capital of Israel. There's no other country in the world where your embassies are in another city other than the capital, except for Israel, because the conflict revolved around that. And God bless Donald Trump for doing this when he moves that embassy into Jerusalem, because I think he finalized that Jerusalem is in Israel, and this is not going to be used as a negotiating chip anymore for a two-state solution. And well, the reason I'm not for a two-state solution is, like I said, when they gave the Palestinians their own land, they elected Hamas to be their government, and instead of protecting their people, Hamas uses all their resources to build terror tunnels, build rockets, to put their own people in danger's way, and basically skewing death counts to make it look like Israel's oppressing them, when in reality, Israel's protecting its own people. They're called the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, not the Israeli invading force. Mm-hmm. They don't go invading other people's homes. Now, there's controversy regarding the West Bank that we can probably talk about later, but for the most part, they're just trying to protect themselves. And
what about the other day?
So recently they had those the protests, right, at the border.
I saw something where like 55 Palestinians died and there was like 2,000 wounded about like 2 months ago or something.
Okay, so let's
explain that, because
let's talk about that. So first of all, I believe the number was 62 Palestinians dead, correct?
55, I think,
so from what I remember, there's 62 because on what was Memory TV, you had one of the leaders of Hamas go on TV and proudly say that 58 of those 62 dead were members of Hamas. And he was treating them as if they were martyrs and heroes. So essentially, 58 out of 62 is bad because apparently one of those dead was like an 8-month-old baby. Some of them were just, Palestinian civilians that were just trying to escape. But you also see in other, I think NPR, which is wildly left-leaning, I believe, they interviewed another member of Hamas, and they asked him, like, why do you fly the Palestinian flag with a swastika? Don't you think that paints you as the evil people in the scenario? And they said, no, because we want to kill the Jews. We want them all dead. Mm-hmm. And even NPR was taken back. They were like, they didn't know how to respond. You can listen to the interview yourself, and the interviewer was in shock because he didn't know how to respond.
What interview is this? If people want to dig it up.
I'd have to probably share the link with you later when I have time. Mm-hmm. And you got to remind me to do that because I'll probably forget. But you have essentially these people that are celebrating the death of Jews and the death of their own people in attempts to killing Jewish people. And now let's look at the actual protest itself. Who are these people bum rushing the border? It is Hamas members hidden within civilian people whom were told, and this is all proven facts, they were all told, if you bum rush the border and you happen to die or get injured, we will pay for your funeral costs, we will take care of your family, but we just need you to go infiltrate this border. And now let's talk about that border. We're talking about, a fence, but there's also a line of armistice, right?
What's that armistice?
It's basically a line that said, that line is Israel said, if you cross this line, it's an act of aggression and we have no choice but to shoot you.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah,
and if you set lines like that, and you have two choices. Either you're a dick and you step over that line and you're like, what do you expect Israel to do? Be like, oh, shit, like they stepped over the line. Do we just let them do it? No, because you get more crossing that line and you get more acts of aggression. So you have to fire at those people. These people knew the rules. They knew they were going to get shot at. So not only that, but they also knew they were going to get compensated if they were harmed. Now, on top of that, you talk about an 8-month-old baby dying in this conflict. Why don't we ask why the fuck that 8-month-old baby was on that armistice line in the first place? Why the fuck did you bring your 8-month-old baby to a protest? Yeah, you asked for this. And it's not like they're firing with sniper rifles with complete accuracy. These are for the most part young IDF soldiers, which are on average around 20 years old. They're young kids. And as far as they know, their lives are in danger. You see a huge swath of Palestinians trying to bum rush your border with Hamas members hidden within them. The fact that 58 out of 62 that were dead were Hamas members is an impressive feat by the Jewish people, and that should be celebrated. The fact that 4 innocent lives were gone, incredibly unfortunate. No innocent lives should be taken.
So how can they look at? So you said 58 out of the 62 were Hamas members. Sure, they're terrorists. Yeah, sure, they can. Their deaths should be celebrated. But how are they able to tell who's Hamas and who's not?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know, but I definitely would say that the Mossad or Israeli intelligence, I guess their form of the CIA, is incredibly proficient at what they do. They are really good at gathering information, intelligence, and for the most part, they would know who these members are. And I mean, you asked me how would they know? I can't tell you how well they would know, but if a Hamas member goes on TV and celebrates the 58 out of 62 being Hamas members, I think that shows that they're doing a good job of what they do. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, what do you think would be the best solution for these two people to coexist or not coexist? What do you think the best solution for this conflict would be? For
this specific conflict, I think, first of all, Hamas needs to be dealt with.
Like a mini ISIS, so to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess Hamas has even condemned ISIS for being too extreme for them.
Jesus.
But for the most part, Hamas needs to be taken care of because you can't have peace with the people who, in their charter, want to see the destruction of your people. So honestly, if it's their life versus my people's life, I'm not going to be sympathetic towards them. I'm going to say I'd rather they're gone than we're gone. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm totally fine if they disband their members and their members don't believe in that charter and they leave and they survive. But if these people, they stand behind that charter, it'd be no different from somebody who post World War II still wore their Nazi uniform and chanted, "I want to kill all the Jews." And I think, for the most part, if Nazis being used to justify violence against people because everybody I think we all want to punch a Nazi in the face. But I mean, even then, is that still okay? And that's debatable.
Whether it's okay to punch a Nazi in the face.
Yeah. Okay. But we're talking about now killing Nazis, and I'm at the point where I'm like, if people want to stand behind Hamas, then they're the type of people that I think that my life in this world would be safer if they weren't in it. As far as the Palestinian people, I think you will see that the statistics have been changing, especially between 2015 and 2017, where in 2015 it was maybe 66% of Arab Israelis that didn't recognize Israel as the Jewish state, and now it's down to 51% that don't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. But 66%, or no, I think it's closer to 70 now. 70% of Arab Israelis, if given the choice to live in a Palestinian land or Israel, said they would rather live in Israel.
Oh,
so the numbers are showing that, for the most part, Palestinians that live in Israel peacefully, because they exist. There's plenty of Palestinians that live in Israel, that have jobs, that voluntarily serve in the military, because only the Jewish people have conscription, but there's plenty of Arab Israelis that voluntarily join the IDF to protect Israel, because those are the ones that are fully aware that this is the only country in the Middle East that has freedom of religion. You are free to be gay if you want. Tel Aviv has its own pride parades, while in the Muslim world, if you're gay, you'll get hung in the streets for everyone to see. Mm-hmm. You had free. Even women have equality. It's the only democratic nation in the entire Middle East, because everywhere else they don't have elected officials. They have pretty much dictators that are also committing their own human right violation against their own people for the most part. But there's some good reform going on. And then Israel is just the freest, most Western culture area in the entire Middle East, and the only reason anybody would want to see its destruction is either A, you're against Western culture, or B, you're against the Jewish people. But for the most part, they're not a threat to anybody. every single war or act of aggression that's come out of Israel was a reaction to an attack that came upon them first.
Okay. So your solution would be just give Israel everything and let everybody just live peacefully if they're willing to abide by democratic law.
Yeah. I mean, if people want to live in a Muslim or Palestinian world, I don't see why all these other countries that are rich from oil or rich from whatever and have some kind of sympathy for the Palestinian people just don't absorb them and give them a better life. Why is it Israel's job, after constantly having civil wars or fighting off intifadas, or not only intifadas, but also fighting off the Palestinian people within their country, getting backed up by all the surrounding countries trying to take them out? Why is it Israel's job to give this people land which they, in an imperialistic sense, took? I mean, first of all, the land that was given to them from the British was much smaller than it is now, I'll admit. But the moment the Palestinians rejected all these peace treaties and attacked Israel and they gained land, I think throughout all these wars, they've gained the Sinai Peninsula, they've gained the Gaza Strip, they've gained other lands, and they've gained the West Bank. But after Egypt had a new leader that said we were willing to have peace with Israel, Israel gladly gave the Sinai Peninsula, which is bigger than the land of Israel itself. And it's rich with oil, so Israel could have had a strong economy if they kept the Sinai Peninsula, but they gave it back to Egypt for peace. When it came to the West Bank, that used to belong to Jordan, but because Jordan attacked Israel after Israel begged them not to, I think it was during the 6-Day War, Jordan attacked them, like, all right, cool, we're going to take the West Bank now. And they took the West Bank, and it belongs to Israel as an imperialistic win for them, and it's their land. But now that land has been, allowed for Palestinian settlements to go on, and now I think a lot of the controversy as far as what Israel is doing wrong is kicking out Palestinian families, allegedly kicking out Palestinian families and letting more Jewish families move in. But I think if you look at that situation too, from the Israeli point of view, first of all, like I said before, there was never an established Palestine. The name Palestinian comes from the Roman Empire, and they referred to the people who lived in that area as Philistines, but it was never Palestine. It was always ruled by different countries, and Philistines...
So there is no country Palestine?
There is no country Palestine. There's only a Philistines, or the Palestinian people, but they're for the most part displaced people like the Hmong in Asia. They're just a people that don't have their own... Or like, even now it's the... I think I just learned about the Assyrians in Iran, which is, they call them Asuri. They're people that are living there that have their own national identity, in a sense, but they don't have their own nation. There used to be an Assyrian empire, but they also had conflicts with Israel, and now they're gone. But yeah, so for the most part, it's Israeli land, and when they kick these families out, as they say, they're not saying, okay, we're randomly evicting you. They're warned. These people are given money. They're given other land to move elsewhere. But for the most part, we're looking at this Jewish state that's trying to grow. There's a lot of families that are trying to move into the country that are for the most part friendly to the Israeli or the Jewish cause.
But why are they kicking these Palestinian people out in the first place?
Because it's not their land. They're just settling there. They're pretty much like squatters. I mean, I don't want to misrepresent it completely, but for the most part, it's Israeli land. And these people that are there have pretty much been squatting there, and it's Israel's land to do as they please with it. And if they're having an influx of immigrants, then they can't. They know they can't just kick these people out into the streets. So what they do is they do remove them from their homes, but they give them money, they give them housing options, and for the most part, they're sending them to the place that they have complete control. So whether you want to look at Gaza as a hellhole, it's still the closest thing to a Palestine there is, and it's, like I said, a microcosm of what happened if there's a Palestinian state. These people don't want to live in that state, but Israel has friendlies moving in, and they need to give them houses. They need to give them somewhere to live. So, I mean, I think that's where the strongest case for moral controversy can come from is within the West Bank, but even that is Israeli land, and it's not Palestinian land. I mean...
I got you. Well, slightly shifting the topic,
Let's do it. Please.
Get a little less controversial, but more controversial too. It's one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people like hate Jews and nothing to do with the thing there. And it's that, do you think that's because Jewish people tend to be more successful? Because there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on, or has been going on.
Right, and I think that's
how do you feel about the statement that Jewish people own the media or run the media?
I find it offensive. I can see cases as to why people think it's true. Because, I mean, like, you'll look at the credits of any producing agency, it'll be a bunch of Jewish names. It's not a lie. You'll definitely see a lot, but for the most part, I just think there's a lot of successful Jews in the world. I don't think they're controlling the media to try to control a narrative. I think that's a very anti-Semitic narrative because for the most part, it's the exact same thing the Nazis did where they tried to paint the Jewish people as a people that was controlling everything and they're the reason to blame for all our hardships. So if you want to blame someone for nowadays fake news, it's a lot easier to say, oh, the Jews are controlling the media, they're controlling the fake news, therefore they're responsible. I've even heard conspiracy theories where Israel and the Jewish people were responsible for 9/11. Like, I've heard conspiracy theories that Jewish people control the weather.
Oh, okay,
but
like that one.
Right? They just get crazier and crazier. And you can look online and you'll always find, like, very intriguing articles, but it'll take an intelligent person to look at these things and be like, wait a minute, that's bullshit.
Wait, how do you have to be intelligent to not know that Jewish people don't control
Well, I think I'll say there's a lot of dumb people that believe these things. I don't want to call them dumb, but for the most part they are because they can't do independent research to define their terms or define what these things are. Like, I think there's a conspiracy that the government controls the weather because there is some device that the government created in like the 60s or something like that essentially shoots infrared beams into the sky, and it records atmospheric patterns and weather patterns, and it returns data that, you know, gives scientists an idea of what's going on in the atmosphere. And then conspiracy theories went nuts with this thing, saying that those beams are actually controlling the weather and they're changing weather patterns. Not the case. They're just measuring them. Maybe they can change them, but there's no evidence of that. And every single conspiracy theory that came out was debunked, and yet you'll still find people that strongly believe those conspiracy theories. And I think that same thing will apply to any conspiracy theory revolving the
They're turning the friggin' frogs gay!
Yeah, exactly. But that's an interesting conspiracy. Of all the ones you point out from Alex Jones, that one, it actually has some truth to it.
How so? I mean, I don't even know. I just know
there was some company that was dumping chemicals into some pond, and it gave the frogs in that area homosexual tendencies. Like, statistically, there's the actual research paper is published and it's out there that the chemicals they put in that water did cause the frogs to have more homosexual tendencies.
But how's that a conspiracy theory? I think a conspiracy theories has to be kind of like these political things.
Well, the conspiracy.
Like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal about frogs being gay?
It's not a big deal. But the conspiracy theory that people, for example, hate Alex Jones for is how he says that Columbine was staged, and all the families of children who died were actors. That's a conspiracy theory that's dangerous is stupid. Why would you believe that? That's I mean, I don't even know the chances of it being true, but let's say that it is true by the 1%.
I think less.
I think you'd have even if there's any slight truth to it, there has to have been even more independent news cycles that discovered that truth, because you can't sustain a story like that so easily. The truth would have come out. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with conspiracy theorists, is that they don't have a lot of basis. They can just give you a lot of, what ifs, or this is what I think is going on and therefore this would be true. It's pretty much for them like quantum theory, except for them, they're even more excited if their conspiracy theory happens to be correct rather than quantum theory itself, because they don't give a shit about what's actually going on in the world. They give a shit of what can they say is going on, that they can say, oh, I knew this before everybody else did. But beyond that, conspiracy theories are dangerous. Like, even the conspiracy theory of 9/11, not the Jewish people doing it, but...
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
I think
George Bush doing it itself, right?
Right. Like, there's conspiracy theories that George Bush let it happen because it gave him an excuse to attack Iraq.
To go to Iraq, yeah.
And they're like, I think that's the best example of a conspiracy theory that you can see a lot of pictures, you can see a lot of like I guess facts. But you can see a lot of I'll call it evidence, not facts.
Okay.
That is very, very compelling.
About the melting steel beams and stuff like that.
Yeah, but even then, like the melting steel beams is stupid because that's the way the buildings fell is literally how they were designed to fall in case of such events happen. Tall buildings are invented to fall downwards, not tip over.
That makes sense.
So, like again, that's been debunked by so many people, but there's still a lot of people that believe in the alternative. Even if you present to them the science, they'll still be like, "Oh, well, that's just the case." I mean, you'll even find conspiracy theories and anti-vaxxers, whether they say you're poisoning your children to the extreme of vaccines are meant to brainwash or mind control your kids. Like, you'll find shit like that, but there's no strong evidence for these things, just little tiny pieces of nitpicked evidence.
Yeah, that's true.
That doesn't form a full story or a full picture, but it gives people an imagination the ability to create a new narrative because it gives them the power to say, "Hey, I'm not saying I'm right, but I could be. But the moment they are right, I told you.
Yeah.
I got you."
Do you know of any conspiracy theories that ever turned out to be right?
I don't look into
I mean, I'm sure there are.
I'm sure there have been, but I probably learned about them after they were proven to be true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, one great example of a conspiracy theory that was proven to be false, though, would be the vaccine one, where somebody published something saying that vaccines cause autism, and after doing further, like, they looked at his papers, okay, that makes sense. But then doing research, they found out that all the test subjects were fake. The evidence was skewed, and that person fudged the data just so they can get something published because they were losing money, and they weren't going to get any more funding. So the British Journal also disavowed and discredited that scientist and got rid of the article. But you see that conspiracy theorists will still latch onto it whether or not it was proven to be true or false.
Yeah, they love that type of stuff.
And if you look at the statistics too, areas that have vaccines have a much lower prominence of a lot of these diseases that we've essentially learned how to destroy or get rid of. So, I mean, back to, the Jewish people and the conspiracies, I think that's also one of many reasons why it's important for the Jewish people to have their own state. Because you see almost in every country that they've inhabited, there's been some kind of act of terror or act of aggression or act of genocide towards them. And it only makes sense that the only place that they would feel totally safe is in their own country. And you see a lot of these Arab nations that are 90% or more Muslim, they don't have any problems with, discrimination, except, the higher up people discriminating the lower people as far as economics and power.
Yeah, but that kind of happens in every country.
That happens in every country. But as far as the Jewish people, they have holidays celebrating all their genocides. And I think Israel's
holidays celebrating a genocide?
Not celebrating genocide,
remembering.
but remembering an attempt at killing it. Like, there's that famous saying for all the Jewish holidays where someone tried to kill us, we beat them, let's eat. That's the basic theme throughout most Jewish holidays. And that includes the one, like, I guess, Hanukkah would be the Maccabees in that war. What is it? Passover was the Egyptians. I don't know too well, but for the most part, that's the common theme. And now you can see in the modern day where in Italy with Mussolini, he tried to remove the Jews. And Stalin said that religion is the opiate of the people, and he tried to remove the Jews. Hitler,
Jesus Christ,
Hitler didn't do much. I'm kidding,
not
but
at all.
he's not famous for anything. Let's see, yeah, anywhere the Jewish people have gone, they've seen some form of discrimination, and for the most part, it's because anywhere they go, they find some way to prosper, and I think it's indicative of their culture of a hardworking people.
Kind of like the Chinese culture.
Exactly. I mean, let's also look at what happened when they first got to Israel, which was mostly deserts. It was all a desert. It was uninhabitable land, but that's the land that was allocated to them from the British. So what they do, they made do with it, and they created things like drip irrigation where they made that land inhabitable. Nobody wanted that land until it was inhabitable. But they made it inhabitable, and now you want to strip it from them or take it from them forcibly? Come on now.
Come on.
You didn't even want it. And now that they developed the technology, which even most of America uses now, to preserve water, to plant your garden without having to waste water, that is such an incredible invention. Because if you look at the land of Israel, they are nowhere near any sources of fresh water. They have the Dead Sea, which is polluted with salts, and they have, what is it, the Mediterranean River?
Don't ask me.
Something. Red Sea, I think, is there. Yeah.
Red Sea filled with period blood?
It's maybe.
That wasn't a sexist joke, it was a joke.
It was a biblical joke.
It was a biblical joke, exactly.
But yeah, so the Jewish people, they've always had it tough, but they've always you also see that they've also done a great job of getting themselves back on their feet, because it's just something that's almost expected now. They've always they're very resilient people, and it's impressive because if you ever look at the actual orthodoxy of the religion, the practice of it, it's just a group of people sitting down studying Torah. They're studying this book, and they're gaining morals that they apply to the life around them, everyday life, and it works for them. They're very studious people. It's so effective that even there's areas in China and Japan that, I don't know about Japan, I think I've seen like YouTube videos of people in China studying the Talmud because they're also trying to figure out what makes this Jewish people so resilient after so many years of oppression. It's an interesting
kind of like the
culture.
Brazilian people.
How so?
Not at all, dude. All right, man. I think that's it. We touched on some controversial topics. Talked about twinism. I think. What's the future looking like for you, Omid? I know you just got admitted into UCSF dentistry program, right? You got what, 4 years there?
Yep, 4 years. Not sure if I'm gonna specialize. So far it's leaning towards general dentistry because I don't want to be doing the same things, whether it be root canals or making dentures all day. I like having a variety and having a surprise going into work, but at the same time I need to be practical. So I'm definitely gonna explore different specialties and see where that takes me, whether I'd have 2 more years in school or more. But for the most part, leaning towards general dentistry, because if you're a general dentist, you can do anything, but if you specialize, it's a courtesy in the practice not to do anything else but your specialty.
Well, yeah.
But you also make like 3 times as much money.
Well, there you go. That's why.
Yeah.
And do you have to do residency after dental school, or is that only?
No, it's optional.
Oh, it's optional.
So dentistry, we have programs called AEGDs, Advanced Education for General Dentistry, and it's essentially you stay at the school longer, doing a lot more clinical work, strictly seeing patients, and you get more practice so that when you do work for either a private industry or open your own business, you have more practice. Because for the most part, after 4 years, depending what school you go to, it might not be enough. Like one of the reasons I used to really want to go to UCLA, but then I learned that the dentists that come out of that program are absolutely not ready to practice because all 4 years they're giving them book work and clinical, versus schools like USC and UCSF, where they drill you on sciences at the beginning, but then the last few years you're strictly working with in the clinic.
Hold up, I just want to do this for your own ego. Oh, what you talking about right here? Top dental schools of the United States, right here. UCLA School of Dentistry, #1. Well,
I'm sure you can find any rankings, but yeah, I've heard UCLA is one of the best. UCSF is still like by most rankings
second.
top 3.
Ooh, come on, you talking? Bro, UCLA is ranking #1, and you're dogging on them.
Well, yeah, they also just changed their program. They have a new dean and a new curriculum, and they're changing it up.
Well, and anyways, congratulations for getting to UCSF. I think that's.
Thank you. Is that just public schools, or is that in general just top?
No, this is helptostudy.com.
Oh, okay. So it's not even credible.
I don't know what the hell it is, dude. It's just super random.
It's just the first Google search.
It's the first or second Google search, dig too much into it.
Well, I'm very proud of the school I got into, minus the politics of the area going on right now. I'm very proud of the school I got into, and I'm excited to start school in September.
Yeah, dude, congratulations. And I hope for the best for you, dude. You and your people. And everyone, dude, not just the Jewish people, but the Palestinians and everyone. Hopefully everybody can be happy and respect one another. And hopefully it happens soon. If not,
most likely not.
Yeah. But anyways, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoy it. That was Omid.
Ellie.
Peace out, guys.